Hey everyone, welcome to Movie Marathons HQ, where we do movie marathons and review some of our favorite movies. This video is part of the Avengers Doomsday movie marathon, where we watch one movie every week as we prepare for the release of Avengers Doomsday in December 2026. Today we are reviewing X-Men Days of Future Past. Released in 2014, it was directed by Bryan Singer, who it turns out is a horrible person with a long history of problematic behavior. But he was the director of the first 3 X-Men movies and was brought back in to direct Days of Future Past. Overall, I like this movie a lot. It is a lot of fun to see all of these X-Men characters together on screen, and it's a very unique movie based on how they set it up and where the influence comes from. This movie brings together the 2 series of X-Men movies, the original trilogy and X-Men First Class. It draws on the Days of Future Past storyline from the Marvel Comics, although it makes some significant changes. Also, spoiler warning, because some of my positives and negatives will go into spoiler territory. For positives, I have the bringing together of the franchises, the 3 clashing mutant ideologies, and the Quicksilver scene. For negatives, I have Hank's serum, which makes no sense at all, and again, the lack of continuity in this franchise. My first positive for this movie is bringing together these franchises. I think adapting the Days of Future Past storyline was a really creative idea to bring the franchises together. So in the comics, Days of Future Past is where Kitty Pryde sends her mind back to her younger self to change the past so that they can change the future. And in the past, she's aided by Wolverine. In this movie, it is Logan, who portrayed once again by Hugh Jackman, whose mind is sent back to his younger self by Kitty Pryde, portrayed by Ellen Page. As I said in my X-Men First Class review, one of the things I like most about that movie is that the emphasis is off of Logan. He has a very small cameo, but the main characters are Eric and Charles, and that's one of the reasons why I think X-Men First Class works. So in Days of Future Past, now we have the emphasis back on Logan, so I don't love that. But still, this movie does a great job shifting between the dystopian future scenes and the hopeful past scenes. There's a real sense of stake of, are these guys really going to be able to pull this off in the past? And then as they shift to the future and the Sentinels find them and are just ripping them apart one by one and the clock is ticking, there's a really fun sense of dread, but hope that they can change the past to change the future. I like how this movie progresses, and it gives each of the timelines some time to shine. The second positive that I'll mention are the 3 clashing ideologies in this movie. So Mystique and Magneto continue their storylines as antagonists that started in X-Men First Class. But this movie builds upon their ideologies, and it sets up a really interesting clash of their ideologies plus Charles Xavier's. Professor X, portrayed by James McAvoy and Patrick Stewart, believes that mutants and humans can coexist. So he seeks to find unity and understanding on both sides. There's also a great scene where the 2 Xaviers meet and have like a therapy moment together inside Logan's mind, which can only be set up in this kind of a cool comic booky movie. And so we have their ideology. Then we have Magneto, portrayed by Michael Fassbender and Ian McKellen. And Magneto believes that only one species can survive. It's either humans or it's mutants. And he's on the side of mutants and mutant supremacy. So in this movie, he's all about that. And we try to save him and redeem him, but he always goes back to mutant supremacy. Other movies have explored those 2 beliefs, like the X-Men trilogy, but where Days of Future Past stands on its own is I feel it introduces a 3rd ideology from Mystique, portrayed by Jennifer Lawrence. Because of Mystique's unique ability to transform and camouflage into her surroundings by shapeshifting, her ideology is that humans should accept mutants, but since they're not going to, at least we need to just survive. It's about self-preservation. So even though she does want acceptance, everything she does is about self-preservation. She learns about what her DNA can unlock in the future in this dystopian future that's ahead of them, but she still doesn't choose a side. She just tries to survive. So I think this movie spends enough time going through these three clashing ideologies. It doesn't necessarily pick one, but allows the audience to kind of sit there and ponder each of them, which is a great narrative dynamic. Magneto has some really great scenes where he sneaks metal into the Sentinels before they are displayed, and then he can control them. He also lifts an entire baseball stadium and drops it around the White House, kind of setting up a little pocket battleground, and he leaves it there when he's done. He just leaves when it's all over, and he leaves the baseball stadium there. Mystique also has some great moments and some time to shine where she impersonates President Nixon to save the real president and his cabinet, and also when she attempts to assassinate Boulevard Trask, portrayed by Peter Dinklage. That's another great scene. The third positive is the Quicksilver scene. What can I say about the Quicksilver scene that hasn't been said? This scene is really, really cool, and it's really fun to see him use his unique superpowers. This version of Quicksilver is portrayed by Evan Peters. They do write him out of the movie because the powers of a speedster are pretty much overpowered and can solve any problem that they have. So it's kind of a cop-out, but I do understand why he's written out of the movie and doesn't really finish being in the rest of it. This is not the same version of Quicksilver as we see later in the MCU. We do have a version of Quicksilver in Age of Ultron portrayed by Aaron Taylor Johnson. That's not the same one here. There's also a version of Pietro in the MCU Disney Plus series WandaVision. I'll spoil that, I guess. Spoiler alert is that is also not this version, and it's not the Quicksilver in the MCU version. It's just some dude who happens to look like actor Evan Peters. It's also a cop-out in WandaVision. It doesn't work for me, but this is not that. This is just him in this X-Men universe. I have a few extra minor positives I just want to throw in there. Toad's character design is incredible. In this version, he is portrayed by Evan Jonigkeit. He's just really a background character with a few seconds of screen time, but he looks so great and is one of my favorite characters in the X-Men comics. I just love what they did with him. We have seen an older version of Toad portrayed by Ray Park in the first X-Men movie, but I do like this character design a lot. I also think this is the best costume Wolverine has ever had. In the dystopian future timeline, he's got a really great suit. He's got some gray in his temples and his hair looks good. He's smoking a cigar. He's got some yellow, very muted yellow in the sleeves of his armor, and he's wearing a cool bulletproof vest. The shape of his claws is a very small detail, but it's a different shape of his claws in the future, and it looks really cool. You can see it if you look closely on the poster for this movie, but it's just a great design. I think his outfit in Deadpool and Wolverine is better, but up until this point, I don't think we had seen a better Wolverine suit in any movies yet. And then finally, there's a really cool post-credit scene. I don't really consider those part of the movie, but there's a great post-credit scene where we see En Sabah Nur, also known as Apocalypse, and he's in Egypt assembling a pyramid, and he's right alongside his 4 horsemen. It's a really cool tease, and we'll of course discuss this more when we get to X-Men Apocalypse. The first negative that I'll mention is Hank's serum, which makes no sense. Early in this movie, it is mentioned that in the past, Professor X was having a very difficult time mentally, and he didn't have his powers in 1973. When Logan goes to the X-Mansion to find him, he sees Professor X walking. That's strange because the last time we saw him in X-Men First Class, Professor X was hit in the spine by a bullet from a gun, which paralyzed him. Later in this movie, Hank McCoy, portrayed by Nicholas Hoult, says that he designed a serum from the same formula that helps him, Hank, control his mutation. So you're telling me that Hank designed a serum that prevents blue hair and a beastly appearance, that also the same serum suppresses a powerful telepath's ability while also healing a spinal injury from a bullet? Make it make sense. Also, to me, a huge part of Hank's character in the comics is that his mutation is visible and permanent, but he embraces it publicly, and generally he's accepted publicly. He's accepted as a member of the scientific community. In this version, he takes this serum that suppresses his powers, but then he hulks out like the Hulk does, so when it's convenient, he can become the Beast again and then use this serum to appear human again. I just don't think that's in line with his character. So I don't like that. There's also a point in the movie where Hank is being chased by a sentinel whose technology was developed separately by Bolivar Trask, which can identify a mutant somehow amongst a sea of humans. And then when Hank injects himself with his serum, 4 vials of it, this sentinel, whose technology has nothing to do with Hank, registers him as human and then lets him go because it doesn't think he's a mutant because of this serum. None of this makes sense at all, I don't think, to anybody, but certainly not to me. So that's a big negative for me. The next negative is, again, no respect for continuity. I do understand that these movies just need to make sense based on themselves, but here in this timeline, Logan is found by Major Stryker at the bottom of a lake full of rebar metal that Magneto slammed into him. But just 5 years prior to this, in a different movie, X-Men Origins Wolverine, Stryker finds Logan in a prison, and he offers Logan and Victor a chance to volunteer for his special ops team, which then becomes Weapon X. They are different actors who look nothing alike and who act nothing alike. Clearly the producers of this franchise do not care about continuity, they just care about one movie at a time. Sure, that's fine, but it's just, again, frustrating. And I know that those movies were created separately and at different times and released in different orders. It just still doesn't work. Slight issue with continuity is that Magneto breaks into some place to get his helmet back, but it's clearly a different helmet than we saw in X-Men First Class. I'm okay with costume changes between movies based on different directors and different costume design teams, but this helmet is unique and one of a kind in this universe. So how did it change? It looks completely different. So just another nitpick about continuity. Now, how might X-Men Days of Future Past connect to Avengers Doomsday? Well, 4 of the actors in this movie are confirmed on the cast list of Avengers Doomsday. We have Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen, probably as Professor X and as Magneto. We will see more of them later in this movie marathon when we get to the original X-Men movies. But of course, the future versions of these characters that we saw in Days of Future Past are eliminated from existence because the heroes do save the day and change the past, which changes the future. So the versions we will see of them in Doomsday would be different than the versions we saw in Days of Future Past. There's also a part at the end of this movie where Logan sees Kelsey Grammer as Beast and James Marsden as Cyclops. Both of them are also confirmed on the cast list of Doomsday, so we'll see them. Probably not those exact same versions because they're only in it for a few seconds, but they're all confirmed to be in the cast of Avengers Doomsday. As I've said before, I do not think we're going to see Hugh Jackman as Wolverine in Avengers Doomsday. Maybe we see him in Avengers Secret Wars in 2027, but even then I'm doubtful, so we probably won't see him again in Doomsday. So that's my review of X-Men Days of Future Past. What do you think of this movie, and how do you think it may connect to Avengers Doomsday? Make sure to let me know in the comments. After this, we are switching to the Halloween portion of the Avengers Doomsday movie marathon. Up until this point, we've been mostly chronological in the expanded MCU, but now that we are in October 2025, the next 3 movies to watch are the Blade trilogy. I thought that made sense because they're all about vampires, which is perfectly at home in October. And those 3 movies do connect to Deadpool and Wolverine, which is in the MCU. And then on Halloween, we are going to watch Werewolf by Night. I know that movie comes way later in release order of the MCU because it came out in 2022, but it is pretty self-contained and doesn't really connect to anything else. So it could be watched at any time in the movie marathon. So I just put it on Halloween because I think that makes sense. So stay tuned for some horror movie content in the coming weeks. Follow Movie Marathons HQ on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and also on Letterboxd, where you can see all 5 versions of the Avengers Doomsday movie marathon. See you at the movies!